Over to you, Gareth.
Thanks, Simon. That's great. As Simon said, so I'm going to be talking not only just about black hairstreaks in Surrey, but I'll be talking about all 5 varieties of hairstreak. But given the discovery of kind of black hairstreaks on Epsom Common, we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk around some of the history of the species, its identification, and kind of the future and some of the research we're planning on Epsom as well. Simon, I think before we start into the core of the presentation, you're going to outline some of the policy around introductions from butterfly conservation.
Yes, I thought that would be a good idea. The subject of introductions, reintroductions, releases is always a bit contentious, and there's a lot of views on both directions on this. Butterfly conservation has a policy on reintroductions and releases, which the link is at the bottom of this slide. And BC does support reintroductions that meet specific criteria, and you can read about those on the link. And you'll be familiar, I expect, with the large blue reintroduction, the checkered skipper reintroductions in England, both of them involving a huge amount of research, a huge amount of work to make sure that they succeed. But then the large blue has been hugely successful, and the checkered skipper looks like it's going to succeed this time. But so while accepting that releases can be of great interest, BC doesn't encourage unauthorized releases. And some of the reasons for that are that most unauthorized releases die out, often quite quickly. They can lead to inappropriate habitat management, so you manage for the released species and other priority species suffer. It can divert resources away from other conservation efforts, either on the ground or at head office or wherever. It can be illegal under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, or and you will require permissions from Natural England if you're either taking specimens or releasing specimens on SSSIs, for example. And we often don't know the origin of released stock, so that could be obtained unethically. And it can create extra work for people. So there's plenty of reasons why reintroductions and releases that are unauthorized are not supported by butterfly conservation. And I wanted that message to be clear at the front of this presentation. So as we go through this highly interesting situation in Epsom Common, you've got the full context. I'll pass you back to Gareth, and we can address that in Q&A if we need to. Thanks very much. Over to you, Gareth.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. That's great. It's a good scene setter. And I think we've got a presentation coming up on climate change and the impact there. And these kind of releases, introductions don't help measuring the kind of impact of those kind of changes as well. So here's an overview of what I'm going to run through this evening. So there's an overall introduction to black hairstreaks. There's a history of black hairstreaks in Surrey, which is quite interesting over time, and how they've been seen at different stages effectively. The discovery last year on Epsom Common, and then the planned research which has been set up around that discovery, but also around, in the wider context, around the other hairstreaks which have all been found on Epsom Common as well, and Ashstead Common too. And then I'll run into some further information and some of the events we've got planned as well. So whenever you read up about black hairstreaks, the word that always appears is elusive. So it is one of our more elusive butterflies. And I'll run into some of the reasons why that is. And part of that is the life cycle it has and the difficulty at seeing different stages of the life cycle in particular. But as I say, it's one of our more elusive species. It's obviously one of our 5 UK hairstreak varieties, which Simon had those lovely pictures of earlier, alongside the brown, green, purple and white letter. It is protected, so it's listed as a species of conservation concern. And for butterfly conservation, we see it as a high priority species. And it is protected under Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. And that in particular is for sale and offer as sale. So it's a butterfly which is actually quite extensively, it's got quite a wide range. So it's native to Europe, but it does kind of span quite a fair bit of the globe. And traditionally it's seen as in Britain as being what is often referred to as having a heartland, and that is effectively the East Midlands, and that's between Oxford and Peterborough. And this distribution map is from Butterfly Conservation. It's from 2010 to 2010 to 2014, and it really does show that kind of heartland itself. And that's because it effectively likes thickets of blackthorn on heavy clay soil, and that's the kind of area that we see it in particular. So in addition to this heartland, there was also a colony discovered in Ditchling in Sussex, and that was discovered a couple of years ago now, so that was in 2018, but there is an established colony in Ditchling as well.
Through to the next round.
When did you find out?
Just now. The hiring committee.
I think some people might not be on the. Can people make sure? Thanks. As I was saying, it's one of our most recently discovered butterflies. So it was discovered in the last 200 years, which is relatively, I think only 5 other UK species have got that accolade. And that is because it's consistently being confused with the white letter hairstreak, and they do look very visually similar. And there was a good period of 70 or so years where these two species were clearly confused, where effectively the white letter hairstreak was having a scientific name after blackthorn. And this was finally resolved in 1828, where it was clearly discovered that it was 2 separate species. And it was known by quite a variety of names. Both were known by a variety of names, including the dark hairstreak. But I think my favourite is the plum hairstreak, which it's a shame that we seem to have missed that as a name. They are very similar visually, as I say. The picture in the top is one I took. This was the first picture of Epsom Common, which I used to formally identify the species. So this was the black hairstreak jesting grass. And the bottom picture is from Butterfly Conservation. That's the white letter hairstreak. Side by side, you can see the difference. Clearly, the white letter hairstreak has that very prominent clear W. And the black hairstreak has a much wider orange band, and it's also got black dots clearly defined on the inside of the orange band as well. But it is they all look very similar, unless you're particularly looking, I guess, for either one of them. It can be potentially quite hard to see the difference between the two. And as I say, the history of the species is quite interesting when you go back and see when it was actually formally identified and defined. And I think even when it was listed and kind of recorded in 1828, they got the name wrong in the article as well, so which didn't help. I think they got the two mixed up. So this is again a picture from Butterfly Conservation. It shows the life cycle of the black hairstreak. And you can see from that predominantly it spends a lot of its life as an egg. So that's through from late July all the way through to April. It's a caterpillar for around a month or so, and then a chrysalis for a relatively short period. I've got a picture there, again from Butterfly Conservation. It's got quite an interesting chrysalis. So it looks like a camouflage and disguise there is a bird dropping, which is interesting to see. And then the flight period is from basically early June or kind of late May potentially through to mid-July or even up to August. But it is a bit of a moving target because in captivity, adults can last up to 3 weeks, but I think what's been recognised is in the wild they get battered quite quickly, and certainly when we saw them last year in numbers, they seemed to be around less than a week. So although they can be seen potentially from end of May through to potentially August, in reality, when they emerge and how long they're out for is quite a short window. So it does make quite hard kind of setting up surveying and observations in advance quite hard, because it's very dependent on environmental conditions when they actually emerge. So I thought it'd be interesting, like I said, the talk a lot does cover the other hairstreaks as well, but given the kind of opportunity to focus on black hairstreaks in particular, thought it'd be interesting to run through some of the history of black hairstreaks in Surrey. So a lot of this is from an article from the skipper that Francis put together, Francis Kelly, and A. Collier retired to Cranley from Northants, and he took with him some specimens of black hairstreak eggs, and following his research into the kind of caterpillars and pupa, he then released the butterflies into Cranley Wood, and this was in 1952. He himself then forgot about this release, he says, and it was 3 years later that, almost by chance, he revisited the clearing quite close to where he released them, and saw black hairstreaks were still there, and he saw a few more, and then he began to return to the site. So by 1956, he saw as many as 13. So the colony in Cranley, that initial release lasted around 10 years, and Collier himself reported that the habitat was bulldozed. It seems a bit of a shame, because he says that the place was an oasis of quiet beauty, which does sound particularly charming. And he describes saving 20 brown hairstreak eggs, but he says that everything else has gone forever, which is a sad note to end there. But it wasn't the end of the story for black hairstreaks in Cranley. And this, again, it kind of shows, as I said, it is an elusive species. So by chance, 15 years later, Jeremy Thomas, who actually did his doctorate, he did a PhD on brown and black hairstreaks. He was some 1.5 kilometers away from the original site, and he was looking for purple emperors. And lo and behold, he found there was black hairstreak there as well. And the same site, the same colony, was independently found by Ken Wilmot in 1976. And over the next few years, surveying found that there was kind of 5 established colonies, and the butterflies spread to adjoining areas. And at that time, it was thought that this was the largest site for black hairstreaks in the country. So although Surrey's not necessarily associated with black hairstreak, at that time, in the 70s, it was seen as the largest site for the butterfly. Again, the habitats were lost to agriculture improvement and clearances. So that ended that particular site. However, it was found that the site had moved, and there was still a further colony on the Downs Link, which is a disused railway line between Guildford and Horsham. And this was last recorded in 1990 for this colony. So it's an interesting overview of kind of finding a colony, losing a colony, and finding it again, all around this initial release, which was done almost by chance, it seems. So into more recent times, some 30 years later. So one of the few good things about lockdown, and the few things around that, is that I've been able personally, like a lot of people, to get out and enjoy walking in the countryside a lot more. And for me, I've been able to go out, kind of for walks before work and things like that. And I was out on Epsom Common, which is really near where I live. and I was in a place there called the Great Pasture, which is a good site for green hairstreaks. And I had been looking for green hairstreaks on this morning, but in late May I saw a black hairstreak, and I managed to kind of get close enough with my phone to grab a picture which was clear enough to clearly identify the species. So that sparked a fair bit of activity. So kind of day one, I just kind of saw the butterfly, and I then alerted to kind of the local Common Association, who then set up chains of emails to other people, which was fantastic. As I say, when the butterfly was out, it was only out for kind of relatively short period, and I tried to do a bit of surveying in that time, and others did too. So this map shows some of the surveying that was done. So Alison, who does one of the transets, she did some surveying of the butterfly from the Great Pasture down all the way down to Stew Pond, which is well known to anyone who visits Epsom Common. And I tried to look more to the south of that as well, and I spotted a black hairstreak on Epsom Common as well, which is the point of the south of this map. As I say, what I personally found was that weekend, it was a very hot May bank holiday weekend, which is probably unusual in itself. But the butterfly, for me, was only out in numbers for a handful of days at best, really. So building on this, we kind of, as a group, who were a collective who were sharing emails about this and kind of what it really meant, was an immediate question we collectively had was, has this site then actually got all hairstreaks? I'd already seen green hairstreak that year, and they'd been recorded previously on the Common. But it did start a bit of a hunt for the other ones, which was great fun. So in particular, Bill, who is, I'm sure people are aware, is our champion on white letter hairstreaks, and Pamela Harwood did a fair bit of surveying for elm then. And not only was the quest to find an elm, it was to find an elm with a kind of visible enough canopy for us to try and get a good snap, a good picture to prove that it was white letter hairstreak in the elm. And on the very edge of Epsom Common, they found an elm tree, which was fantastic. And Steve Nevard, he took the first picture of the white letter hairstreak on that tree, which was great. And also Bob Yo then saw a white letter hairstreak on one of his transepts as well. So that was clear that we had the white letter hairstreak as well. And then when I was looking at the same tree, I actually, pretty much the same time, I was snapping away trying to get pictures of white letter hairstreaks. And there was actually in the same tree was a brown hairstreak, unbeknownst to me, which I took a picture of too. So that showed that there was, we already knew that kind of brown hairstreaks were present on the site, but that clearly showed that we had brown hairstreaks as well. And we're really lucky with purple hairstreaks, actually. There's a lot of really good oak trees, it's very old oak trees, and the purple hairstreaks are pretty much ubiquitous across the site, which is great. So we're one of 15 or 16 so sites in the UK which have all 5 hairstreak species, which is a real great achievement and really good for us to know about, and really exciting too. So that's great. So building on these discoveries, talking to Bill and people, we thought it would be good to do an egg hunt. And I put in this quote from Jeremy Thomas. So basically he says here, to find 2 or 3 in an hour is very good going, whereas you might find 100 brown hairstreak eggs in that time. So, I mean, I personally spent a fair bit of time looking for black hairstreak eggs with no joy, but we did do the egg hunt, as I say, organised by Bill, and it was won by Sarah Clift. There was a group of 10 of us, so we were out there for kind of 3 or 4 hours, and we did find 1 egg, and which was great because not only does you know, that really shows that it's a colony which is laying as well, which is again another kind of milestone in understanding what's going on really. So that was fantastic. So what is it about Epsom and Ashstead Commons that make it viable? Why have we got habitat which is suitable for all hairstreak varieties? And this is largely, this is down entirely to the management of the site. So it's a reasonably small area, both of them, both Epsom and Ashstead Common, so they make up the site of special scientific interest. And across both sites there's been some really careful and thought out management to create a diverse range of habitats. So that ranges from woodland to wood pasture, scrub and grassland. And some of that has been created through introduction of things like cattle grazing as well. So this has created this really rich environment for different creatures, including the hairstreaks that we've seen. And the picture on the right, that kind of typifies why we've got this potential for different hairstreak varieties. So in the background is an oak tree, which is larval plant for the purple hairstreaks. In the midground in white, we've got flowering blackthorn for black and brown hairstreaks. And then we've got gorse at the front for green hairstreaks. So you can see in that picture, you can understand why we've got all four of those varieties of hairstreak all on this site, all at this location, for example. So building on that, I've been discussing with Alan Stewart at the University of Sussex, doing a kind of defined research project, a master's in looking into the hairstreaks on the common, and with the support of those managing the common and butterfly conservation. And some of the key activities we're keen to focus on is, one is initially understanding the size of the black hairstreak colony, so its size, location, in particular given its the kind of descriptions and the type of habitats it likes. And there are key areas of blackthorn because it is not described as a very mobile species. So you often find particular stands of blackthorn where it's localized. So what are the key areas? Also looking at new research ideas as well. And I've been talking to Peter Howarth, for example, around using techniques like thermal imaging, whether we can use that to gauge the size of colonies of butterflies, which is good. And the endpoint, the outcome of this is to come up with a management plan which can be used to support all the hairstreaks in this relatively small area. So step one, we're looking at surveying across both Epsom and Ashstead Common. So I've been out with a fair few people. So Stuart and Sarah from Epsom Borough Council, we've looked at particular sites, in particular for white letter hairstreaks. And Susa Featherstone, I had a good walk with her around particular sites for on Ashstead Common. And we've come up with 4 survey routes. And I'd really like to thank Peter and Nikki and Pamela as well, who've agreed to help do some of the surveying with me, which is fantastic. So we're planning to start that imminently, and the kind of routes have been set up around trying to identify areas which would be interesting for all hairstreak species effectively. There's obviously good stands of blackthorn in there, but there are kind of other areas which would appeal to other hairstreaks too. So we're hoping basically, you know, towards the end of June to have a real understanding of where black hairstreaks are across the common, but also, you know, kind of green hairstreaks are fleetingly seen, so some real understanding of where they are. And hopefully if we can do that by the end of June, that would be good. And then later into the summer, we'll obviously be focusing on brown and purple hairstreaks. And with white letter, it is very much about, as anyone who saw Bill's talk will know, about finding good areas of elm trees, and they are effectively localized in the canopies of elm trees. So we've got some of those on both Epsom and Ashstead Common, which we'll be investigating too. So that brings to a close kind of the main focus of the talk and the kind of ideas and the areas of research we're looking at for the future. I thought it'd be really good just to highlight that there are some butterfly conservation events planned around Black Hairstreak. So we set those up for late May through to the 10th of June. But as I say, it is only out for a short period. So we are kind of really going to be out there observing what we see on the ground, and we'll try and reflect that and inform people as much as possible ahead of those dates effectively. So there's a fair bit of material I've gone through to put this together. I really wanted to highlight some of that. So there's Francis's article on the Cranley Hairstreaks, which I do recommend. So that's on the website, and you can look at it's in Skipper 60. And I think Francis went back to some of the original material on that to get some of the quotes. There's further information on butterflies in Surrey, and some of the kind of characteristics and behaviours is documented in Jeremy Thompson's thesis. And again, the quote I got from his book with Richard Lewington, which I'm sure many people have. The book by Marcus Sam is really good into going into the history, and that's a really interesting read. I do recommend that book. And yeah, it's some of the, it documents a lot of the Victorian collectors as well, and yeah, the kind of hunt for aberrations and things. It's an interesting book, that. And there's a short article myself I did in the autumn in the Skipper, just around the discovery of Black Hairstreak and Epsom Common. I'm sure a lot of people have seen these already, or kind of watched these, but on our YouTube channel we have got the talk by Bill on white letter hairstreaks, and there's also brown hairstreaks. And it's probably worth saying, actually, in terms of you know, kind of trying to target and find out more about a species, the kind of success that Ken and Gillian have had around brown hairstreak eggs has been really interesting. So finally, I would like to close with kind of, you know, some real thanks to a lot of people, really. And I think for me personally, I think in this time of lockdown, where it has been a year of a lot of Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, and not being able to see kind of work colleagues necessarily, to be able to meet so many new people and so many you know, what I consider will be good friends for the future has been really, you know, real privilege, actually. So Simon, of course, and it was actually Simon, when I was discussing doing research, it was Simon who suggested initially that I start to put things down and kind of put together a 1-page or a 2-page of kind of my ideas, which really started the ball rolling. Bill, I'm sure everyone knows, and Bill's been really helpful, and he organised the successful egg hunt. Stuart, Sarah and Pete, from the beginning, Stuart has been really enthusiastic and really, really supportive, and you know, I owe him a lot for that. So it's been really good, and same with Sarah. Andy and Susa, very supportive as well, and I think we're hoping to try a few different research ideas with their support too. Alan has kindly agreed to be my supervisor for the Masters, which is terrific. And then there's a whole list of friends and people who have been really supportive there as well. So I'd like to thank everyone, and I think, Simon,